The Southern Alps are a mountain range extending along much of the length of New Zealand's South Island, reaching its greatest elevations near the island's western side. The term Southern Alps generally refers to the entire range, although separate names are given to many of the smaller ranges that form part of it. The range includes the South Island's main divide, which separates the water catchments of the more heavily populated eastern side of the island from those on the west coast. Politically, the main divide forms the boundary between the Canterbury and west coast regions. Location and description. The Southern Alps run 500 kilometers north to south. The tallest peak is Aoraki, Mount Cook, the highest point in New Zealand at 3,724 meters, and there are 16 other points in the range that exceed 3,000 meters in height. The mountains are cut through with glacial valleys and lakes. According to an inventory conducted in the late 1970s, the Southern Alps contained over 3,000 glaciers larger than a hectare, the longest of which, the Tasman Glacier, is 29 kilometers in length down towards Lake Pukaki. A chain of glacial lakes are found on the eastern side of the ridge, from Lake Coleridge in the north to Lake Wakatipu in Otago in the south. Settlements include Maruia Springs, a spa near Lewis Pass, the town of Arthur's Pass, and some lakeside resorts. The Southern Alps were named by Captain Cook on the 23rd of March 1770, who described their prodigious height. They had previously been noted by Abel Tasman in 1642, whose description of the South Island's west coast is often translated as a land uplifted high. The climate is cold with snow and ice year-round at the highest points. Because of its orientation perpendicular to the prevailing westerly winds, the range creates excellent wave-soaring conditions for glider pilots. The town of Omarama, in the lee of the mountains, has gained an international reputation for its gliding conditions. The prevailing westerlies also create a weather pattern known as the nor'east arch, in which moist air is pushed up over the mountains, forming an arch of cloud in an otherwise blue sky. This weather pattern is frequently visible in summer across Canterbury and North Otago. The nor'wester is a foehn wind similar to the Chinook of Canada, where mountain ranges in the path of prevailing moisture-laden winds force air upwards, thus cooling the air and condensing the moisture to rain, producing hot dry winds in the descending air lee of the mountains. Geology. The Southern Alps lie along a geological plate boundary, part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, with the Pacific Plate to the southeast pushing westward and colliding with the northward moving Indo-Australian Plate to the northwest. Over the last 45 million years, the collision has pushed up a 20 kilometers thickness of rocks on the Pacific Plate to form the Alps. Although much of this has been eroded away, uplift has been most rapid during the last 5 million years, and the mountains continue to be raised today by tectonic pressure, causing earthquakes on the Alpine Fault and other nearby faults. Despite the substantial uplift, most of the relative motion along the Alpine Fault is transverse, not vertical. Flora. The mountains are rich in flora, with about 25% of the country's plant species being found above the treeline in alpine plant habitats and grassland, with mountain beech forest at lower elevations. The cold windswept slopes above the treeline are covered with areas of fellfield. To the east, the Alps descend to the high grasslands of Canterbury and Otago. Plants adapted to the alpine conditions include woody shrubs like hebe, dracophyllum, and coprosma, the conifer snowtotara, and carex sedge grasses. Fauna. Wildlife of the mountains includes the endemic rock wren and the kea, a large parrot that was once hunted as a pest. There are also a number of endemic insects adapted to these high high altitudes, especially flies, moths, beetles, and bees. The beech forests of the lower elevations are important habitat for two birds, the great spotted kiwi and the South Island kaka. Threats and preservation. The mountains are inaccessible and retain the natural vegetation. A large proportion of the range is well protected as part of various national parks, notably the Western Typotinian National Park, Mount Aspiring National Park, and Aoraki, Mount Cook National Park. Protected areas such as Lake Summer Forest Park. Indigenous plant life is affected by introduced animals such as red deer, chamois, and Himalayan tahr, all of which have at times been targeted for culling, while the birds and reptiles are vulnerable to introduced predators. Panoramic view.